Hi! So I'm here today to share with you a really super cute card that has got some fun fall colors as part of it. I'm going to be doing some colored pencil coloring with this, and I have a few tips for you so when you do colored pencil coloring in your own cards that you can actually get the color and the vibrancy that you're looking for with it. So we're going to use a few different stamp sets today. So we're going to use the Flannel Life stamp set. So the number is SS0325. This is going to be our background. And we're going to be using the Creature Comforts stamp set and dies with this. So this is SS0308. There's some really adorable images on this. And I'm going to mention that this is part of the starter kit options that you can pick from. If you decide to sign up as a Journey Coach, which we have the big deal going on right now, which is kind of an awesome deal, you get to pick from a list of stamp sets. And this is one of the stamps that you can actually pick on that big deal. So I'm just going to mention that really quick because right now you can join as a Journey Coach for $25. And that $25 kit, you get so much in it. So the $25 kit, you actually get 2 full-size stamp sets. Now the stamp sets kind of vary a little bit in price, but you're looking right around $16 to $18 for most of the full-size stamp sets. You get to pick out 1 ATS stamp. So these are about $7, $8 with that. You get to pick out a die set as well. And you get to pick out an ink pad, a colored ink pad with it. So you get a lot for that $25. So it's definitely worth the price if you're thinking about joining as a Journey Coach to actually look into getting that stamp set. And the great part about it is not only are you getting that starter kit for $25, but then you have the opportunity to actually earn the Platinum Machine, which is $250 normally. You can get that for $50. So you earn that within your first 3 weeks of joining. So that's a really awesome deal. And I have more details about it over on my blog. So you can just visit muchlovesara.com and you can get all the details on there. So let's get started on the card because that's what you're actually here for. I'm going to flip the camera around and try and get it all straightened out and have it ready for you. Just one moment. Okay, I think we're where you can see what's going on here. So we're going to start out today with a piece of pumpkin bread cardstock. Now this is cut to 4 inches across by 5 1/4 inches tall. And I am just going to kind of line that up on my paper because that helps me line up to get straight. And I have the background stamp already on the block. So I'm going to stamp this today in buttercream ink. Now buttercream ink and whipped cream ink are a little bit different than our normal inks because these are not a fusion ink, they are actually a pigment ink. And a pigment ink sits on top of the cardstock. So it's going to take a little bit longer to dry than a fusion ink or a dye-based ink would in your cardstock. So we're stamping this first today so that we can get this to dry while we're working on our coloring. So I just inked that up and now I'm just going to put it over the top. And since I'm a little off kilter here with the camera in the way, I'm trying to get that. So I have this fun desk that I made out of a hollow core door. And it's huge and it's nice. But when I do big stamps, it kind of dips in. So I always kind of have to push a little extra hard to make sure that I get the stamp all the way stamped. So peel that back and we have a plaid background. So I'm going to just set that up here so it can dry while I'm working on my coloring. So for my images, I did the little fox and this cute little bunny, and I stamped them on buttercream cardstock, and I stamped them with hazelnut blend ink. So the reason that I used the brown instead of black was because I'm doing a lot of oranges and browns in the card, and the black would look kind of harsh against that. So I'm using the brown as a way to keep it from being harsh. So I'm pulling out my pencils over here to the side, and I'm going to start on the fox, and I'm going to start using 040. This is kind of a reddish tone with it, and I'm just going to start coloring. So the way that I color with colored pencils is I color in kind of little oval-y type circles. And the reason for that is that doesn't leave lines in your coloring. If you color with lines up and down, you're going to leave a texture behind that has the lines as part of it. So, and I'm coloring very softly. So the reason that you color with a light touch is because when you're coloring on cardstock, what's picking up that lead is the grain of the cardstock. So on a rougher textured paper, the grains stick up and there's a big crevice that all that color can go into. This is a fairly smooth cardstock, so that crevice is not nearly as deep. And if you're pushing on that paper and you're burnishing those crevices down, your crevices are even lower, so you can only get so much color on top of that. So if you use a very light touch, you can build your color up a lot easier than you can if you start out with a very harsh touch, because if you're coloring very hard on that, you're pushing all those fibers down and you have nothing to really pick up the color on top of it. So if you color with a light touch, then you can just keep adding color on top of it and you don't burnish all of that way down. So in some of the very fine details, you might have to just use some light lines just to fill that in. But anytime you have any open space, try and use little circles or ovals to fill that in. So when I very first started card making in 2012, I was coloring images for my cards all the time. So I'm super excited whenever I get to color images because it makes me all happy. So okay, so now I'm going to come in, and this is pretty red on there. So I may decide to go over it just a little bit and add a little bit more color to it. Let's see here. But right now I'm going to start with the shadows. So I'm going to use 041 for the shadows. You wouldn't usually use black. Black is not going to give you a shadow. It's going to be a little too high contrast when you're using that. Only in the very, very darkest of spots would you ever have something that would truly be black, because everything would normally just have a much darker tone than it normally is, or kind of be even more gray than it would be black. But especially on people and on critters and things like that, you want a little warmth to them. So you're better off using a darker brown to actually add those shadows. And also remember that items are round. They're not flat on the screen, or on the screen. On an actual fox, they'd be rounded out. They wouldn't be flat on the page. So the shadows are actually going to come up towards the sides a little bit. You're going to have a little bit more depth with it. So I'm going to kind of blend that all out, and I am going to bring in this brown. So this is 038 that I'm going to bring in. So I'm just going to go right over the top of everything that I have done. This is just going to bring a little bit more kind of orangey tone to it. And again, if you're using that light touch, you can blend colors really easily. And you're not going to burnish that paper down to a point where it just won't take the color on top of that. Okay. So now we're going to do the whiter portions. So I always like to put down my white first. This is giving it a little bit of a base that's going in. And then we can add some shadows into on top of that white. So I'm going to use the same two brown shades that I used before to add my shadows, but I'm going to do this again, very light touch, especially with this darkest one, because I don't really want this to go very dark. I want this to still be quite light. So I'm just going to add just a little bit right there around the nose to kind of make the nose come out a little bit, and then again on the neck. And that one can get just a little bit darker because there's going to be the nose protruding out so much further. And then we're going to go just down here along the bottom edge of the tail. And then I'm going to grab this lighter brown again and kind of work that just over the top, add a little bit more warmth. And then again, I'm going to go over it with the white. This just kind of blends everything out and makes it just pop together like that. So I'm going to add a little pink in his ears. So I'm going to use 09 to just add a little bit of pink. And all I'm going to do is just color very lightly, and then I'm going to actually come back in and press just a little bit more firmly down at the very bottom of the ears, just to make that a little bit darker, but leave it pretty slim. And then now's when you can actually pull out your black. So I'm going to pull out 042. This is only going in two places on this. So because I stamped this in brown, I want his nose and his eyes to really pop out at you, and it really kind of helps to make them more expressive. So I'm going to just use the black right over the top of his nose and right over the top of his eyes. And you can just see how much more that pulls his face out and gives him more expression with that. So we're going to start with the bunny next, and I'm going to work from the same color palette that I used previously. I am going to pull in one additional color with that, but you want to have them not necessarily match, but coordinate. They need to feel like they're part of the same scene. So we're going to start out on the bunny by coloring him with white. And we're going to get all of his fur areas just covered with some white. And now I'm going to pull in this 038, that lighter brown that we used on the fox, we're going to use here for shadows on the bunny. And we don't want him to go too high, just slightly. So he's going to have a little bit of a reddish tone. We're kind of going for a strawberry blonde bunny here. So get around the edges of his face. Remember, you're trying to give him a rounded look and some depth with that. Again, under his neck is going to be darker because his head is protruding out from that neck. And under his arms. Here where his leg tucks in over his foot needs a little shadow. We're going to do that on the same other side. And then the bottoms of his feet. And then the other color that I'm pulling in on this one is I'm pulling in my 017, and I'm going to use this very lightly. I don't want him to be super yellow, but again, we're looking for that kind of just slightly strawberry blonde look to have him fit in. So I'm just going to bring that in and go right over the top of the shadow parts and then just pull it up further in terms of the color. So you kind of get a little bit of an ombre blend with it, which is exactly what you're looking for when you're coloring. And then I'll come back with the white again and just kind of blend that all out. And then make sure his belly gets some white on it too. Okay, so we're going to go in again with the pink color that I had before, this is 09, and just lightly fill in his ears, and then just a little bit heavier pressure down towards the bottom just to make those a little bit darker. You're staying in the same color, but you are actually adding more color in there. So, and then I'm going to make his nose pink too, because he's a cute little bunny. And then again with the black, just right over the top of his eyes. Just adds a little bit more life in there. So that's the coloring on those. So what I'm going to do next is start working on my card base. So I have my pumpkin bread piece that's been stamped. I have a piece of oatmeal cookie that is cut with the second largest journey circle die and the punch around the edges to add the piercing. And I have a strip, it's a 1/2 inch high strip of hazelnut blend cardstock. So I am going to actually adhere these directly onto my background. I'm going to use a little bit of the permanent adhesive runner. And I happen to absolutely love putting stuff a little bit off the edge of the page. It adds some movement, and I really like the look of that. I'm going to take my Detail Pro snips and just snip that hazelnut piece to an angle. And then I am going to put some adhesive down the back and then just put that down here towards the bottom of that circle. I'm leaving a little bit of that circle peeking out from underneath. Then I'm going to take my Grand Pro shears, and I mentioned this in my live on Saturday, but I love these for cutting things along the edge because you can do it in one stroke and you don't have parts where you've gone opening and closing the scissors and you kind of get that little rough spot with it. You don't have that if you have a longer blade that you're making that cut. So before I attach our little critters on here, I am going to get my splash and splatter box out. We're going to put this on the work surface and just put our little card front in there. And I am going to use gold silk on this card. I'm going to just splatter it right across the front here. Just some added sparkle and interest to that background. I'm messy with silks and splashes and things, so that's why I use the box, is it keeps it from being everywhere in my craft room when I'm working on stuff. So I am going to pull out my sentiment that apparently I forgot to pull out. I love the grids as well on our clear blocks. They make it so much easier to line stuff up. So I'm going to use Hazelnut Blend ink. Kind of got the theme going on with all of that. And ink up my sentiment. I'm going to stamp this up here in the upper corner of my circle. So now we're going to work on putting together Mr. Fox and Miss Bunny here. So I want him to sit a little bit off the edge of my card front. So I'm going to put some dimensionals on his back. And just attach him right here. And you just always want to make sure you're not covering up your sentiment as you go. So then we're going to add our bunny. And I'm going to use some smaller dimensionals for him because he's a little bit tinier. And I'm going to overlap him over the top of this fox. So get the dimensionals off of, backing off of him. And we're going to put him right there. Looks good. So the only thing that's left is we're just going to attach our card front to our card base. This is an oatmeal cookie card base. My fancy stick-em techniques there. Just line them up. And I do find it easier to put the card front on the card base if the card is open. It's one of those weird things, but it works for me. So that's the card. And if you want to, you can actually stamp your little fox and bunny inside the card, just for a little something when you open the card up. But that is the card for today. So I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that it is helpful for you when you are doing some coloring, that maybe you've learned some techniques or something that would work for you. I'm just checking really quick to see if there are any questions in there. I'm not seeing anything. Hello, everyone. My camera phone sits higher than where I'm sitting at, so I can't see what's going on up there. And I have a laptop to the side of me, but I have to kind of lean over to get to it. So, but anyway, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Much love to you all. Bye.